With the 2026 New Year Warhammer reveal revealing a whole bunch of new Bonereapers, it's piqued my interest in fleshing out my Bonereapers army. Now, as the name Bonereapers would suggest, Bonereapers are almost entirely composed of bone, so I thought it'd be a great opportunity to showcase how I actually go about painting bone on Warhammer models. Now to do that, we'll be using my Liege Kavalos, who I got secondhand from Marketplace a couple of months back. Now, as Mr. Horseman has a very big base, he needs some cork on it to make it look a little bit interesting. So to begin, I put some cork down that will mimic marble in the desert, and then put down some Vallejo's brown earth, which I like to use as sand. Now, to prime, I use Vallejo's grey through the airbrush, and as I've said previously, I generally prefer using an airbrush to apply a prime, as it really allows me to get into all the nooks and crannies and ensure that there is an even coverage over the entire model. Now, with the prime done, I then go back in again with the airbrush, using some of Vallejo's khaki, thinned down to ensure that it doesn't clog in the airbrush. You'll also notice that I'm using a few sub-assemblies, and this is to ensure that I'm able to especially get in and paint all the bones and the magic bones inside the bones of the model without it being covered up by his legs or his dangly cloth. Now, after having applied that initial base coat of khaki, we'll then go in with a brush and paint on some of the Briar Queen Chill on any of the skulls, as well as the recesses of the bones. Overpaint in this particular step is absolutely fine because we're going to be going back in with some khaki later. I find this step quite useful because it allows to add some magical shadowing to all the bones, as well as highlighting that the bones inside the skeleton horse are still ethereal or alive and being used to power the energy of the horse. After having applied the Briar Queen Chill, we'll then go in with some Agrax Earthshade through the airbrush and actually use this to shadow any of the areas that would be in shadow. So any of the insides of the legs, as well as applying it to most of the bone areas to help add some shadows into the recesses. Again, because we're going to be going back in with a whole bunch of paints to highlight, more is better than not enough, so I wouldn't worry if you think there's too much. Now, it's important to note with the Agrax is that it's already a really thin paint, so you don't need to add any airbrush thinner to make it shoot through the airbrush, but it is important, especially living in Australia, to use some airbrush flow improver, because otherwise I find that the Agrax dries in the tip and then can result in some spluttery messes when you start amping up the air and then it splurts out all over the model, which is not great at all. Now, after applying Agrax to add all the shadows on the base model, we'll then go in with the brush and apply some of Vallejo's blue-green to all of his dangly cloth and Mr. Man's cloak. We'll then go in with Vallejo's dark sea green and apply it to the sword, the hooves, the teeth, the leather, and the horns. Now, the last thing we'll do before jumping back on the airbrush is hitting any of the exposed metal on the horse with some of Vallejo's dark gunmetal. And having done that, we're now going to jump back on the airbrush. Now, like that initial layer of khaki, we're going to thin down this paint because otherwise it will get clogged in the airbrush, which is not ideal. And we're going to use this to blend in some lighter colors on both the cloak, as well as applying a sort of sheen effect to the sword. Now, with that done, we're going to go in and tackle the magic bones. So building on that initial layer of Briar Queen Chill, we're going to layer up some highlights using two colors. First one being Vallejo's light green blue, and the second one being Vallejo's off-white. Now, for the first layer, we're going to try and hit as much of the magic bones as possible, leaving some of the Briar Queen Chill in the recesses. Now, for the second layer, we're going to be using about a 50-50 mix of light green blue and off-white. Again, going and hitting the magic bones, but hitting less of it, again, to help simulate that idea of light on the exposed areas and shadows in the recesses. Finally, I went in with off-white by itself, and again, just on the very exposed areas of the bones. It is worth noting you don't necessarily just have to stick to 3 layers here. You can really go in as many layers as you like, slowly increasing the amount of off-white you use. Doing this will help blend the colors together as opposed to having stark differences between each of the layers, making it more of a believable effect. So now for the bones themselves. So obviously we've hit those bones with Agrax previously, and we're going to start building up some highlights in a very similar fashion to what we actually did for the magic bones. Now, just like the magic bones, we're going to be using two colors only. We're going to be using Vallejo's Khaki and Vallejo's Bone White. And in the exact same fashion as the magic bones, we're going to be layering up the exposed areas of the bones, starting with a base of khaki, and then slowly adding in more and more and more bone white until we're left with just bone white on the exposed areas. Now, because this model is a lot more bone than magic bone, I went and did, I think, 5 layers in total. And again, this was really just to help build that transition from the khaki to the bone white to make it look as believable as possible. Now, with all the bones done, it's now time to go in and tackle the gold. Now, you could go in and use a true metallic metal gold and be done fairly quickly, but to help elevate our skills as a painter, we're going to go in and make use of some non-metallic metal gold. Now, the specific technique and colors I'll be using is very heavily based on Squidmar's non-metallic metal gold. So if you're wanting some more information about this specific technique, then I'd recommend checking out their video. But in this case, we're going to be using 4 colors. Firstly, we're going to be using Vallejo's Charred Brown, Parasite Brown, Ice Yellow, and then we're going to be using a Sun Yellow as a glaze to help blend all the colors together. So to begin, on all of the gold, we're going to be applying Charred Brown. This is going to function as the base coat of all of the gold and represent the extreme shadows. After having applied that, we're then going to apply Parasite Brown, again, leaving some of that Charred Brown exposed to act as shadows. And it is worth noting that we are actively trying to mimic what light would look like. So obviously the higher we get on the model, the less charred brown that should be exposed. So with that layer of Parasite Brown done, we're then going to go back in and mix some Ice Yellow with our Parasite Brown in about a 70-30 mix of Parasite Brown to Ice Yellow. Now again, because we're trying to mimic what light is doing when it's hitting the model, we're going to be applying this particular layer to more of the exposed areas of the model, again leaving those deep shadowed areas in the Charred Brown, and then the minor shadows in Parasite Brown. And again, after that layer, you've probably guessed it, we're going to be mixing Parasite Brown and Ice Yellow, but in this case in a 30-70 mix. So the predominant color is Ice Yellow, but the tone is being brought down by that Parasite Brown. Again, applying it to more of the exposed areas and leaving the shadows in the darker colors. Now finally, you've probably figured where this is going, the final layer is going to be done in Ice Yellow. It's very important for this because it's quite a bright color that we're only going to be hitting the most exposed areas of the model. Now the last thing we're going to do to tie all this together and make it look a little bit more like gold is to apply some thinned down Sun Yellow. Doing this makes all the paint underneath look yellow, and because we've thinned it down, it's going to work as a glaze, so it'll help blend all the previous colors together and then really help to sell that idea that you should be looking at gold. Now I don't actually do this at this point in time on the model because I still have the armor and a few other bits and pieces of the model to paint, so in case there's any spillage, I'd like to come back in and fix it up, but then before then applying this glaze. With the gold all done, we are now going to go and tackle the turquoise or cyan blue armor that is on the model and on the horse. Now, again, very similar to some of the other techniques, we're going to be using 3 colors. We'll be using Vallejo's Evil Red, Vallejo's Dark Sea Blue, and Vallejo's Blue Green. Now, to begin, we'll be applying a base of Evil Red to all of the armor. Now, you might be thinking, why would we use an Evil Red when the end color we're looking at hitting is blue, which is obviously very different to red? And the reason that is that because the Evil Red, although it is red, it's more of like a purpley magenta, which contrasts and complements the blues quite nicely. And we're basically going to be using this to shade the recesses of the armor, which will really help push that armor to the next level. So after applying that evil red, the first layer is going to be a layer of dark sea blue, taking care to ensure that some of that evil red still remains visible in the recesses. Now for subsequent layers, we're using the exact same approach that we used on the gold. So the second layer is a combination of dark sea blue and blue-green in a 70-30 mix. The third layer is a mix of dark sea blue and blue-green in a 30-70 mix. And then finally, that last layer is just blue-green by itself. Again, reusing the same technique that we used on the gold, but obviously on different colors. Now finally, now that all the big pieces of the model is painted, we can now go back in and apply the wash to both the gold and the armor. So as I mentioned, the gold is a thinned down mix of sun yellow, and you're wanting to ensure that it's not too thin and not too thick. It's obviously easier said than done, but in this case, you're looking to ensure that those underlying colors shine through, but still they look quite yellow. Now with that applied, we're then going to go in with a blue-green wash and apply it to all the armor. Now obviously the last layer of armor was already blue-green, but using this thinned down blue-green helps to really blend those previous layers together. Now with all that done, the model is close to being finished, but there's a couple bits and pieces that we still need to go and do. So firstly is the eyes and the gems on the model. So to begin with, we'll be going in jade green as the base, and then following this up with a green sky to act as the pupils on the skeleton's face, as well as the gem. Now we go back in with the airbrush here with some green ink, just to blast it around the gem, just to look like it's a bit of reflective light being shown onto the model around it. Now with the model all done, it's now time to jump into the base. So to begin with, we use some of Vallejo's earth on the sand, and then Vallejo's dark blue-gray on any of the marble or the exposed stones. Now we wash the Vallejo's earth with Agrac's Earthshade and the stones with Nuln Oil. With the washes all done, we'll then go in and tackle the sand. To do this, we'll go and dry brush in some earth, and then on top of that, we're going to be dry brushing some plague brown. Important to note that with this second dry brush of plague brown, we're trying to hit less of the model to act as brighter patches of sand. Now for the marble and the stones, very similar approach to what we did with the sand. We're going to be going in and hitting it with a dry brush of dark blue grey, and then finally going in with a dry brush of stonewall grey. Now that's the model basically finished, but to really help build the base a little bit further, we're going to chuck on some cute little desert plants from Game of Grass, and then bam, with a coat of varnish, that is the model done and dusted. Now, I'm really happy with how Mr. Bossman has turned out. Previous to this, I'd only painted the original spearhead, so it was nice to be able to go in and tackle a more boss type creature in AOS. I hope you've enjoyed watching the video, and I hope the bone tutorial and a couple of the other techniques that I've demonstrated was helpful. I'm really looking forward to the new Bonereapers release wave, and I'm very keen to paint up some more models. But thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day.